January 1945. The East China Sea was a graveyard of steel. The Japanese Imperial Navy, desperate and cornered, had gathered a massive convoy, 30 ships, including 27 lethal destroyers and escorts to transport vital supplies. Protecting them was a wall of sonar, depth charges, and hundreds of eyes scanning the black water. In the center of the storm was a single American shadow, the USS Barb, commanded by a man who didn't follow the rules of war. His name was Eugene Fluckey. The Japanese radar picked him up. The hunters didn't hesitate. 27 destroyers turned their bows, their engines screaming as they raced to crush this lone intruder. They thought he would dive. They thought he would run for the deep, open ocean like every other submarine in history. But Fluckey looked at his crew and said the words that would change naval history. "They think we're running away. Let's show them they're just chasing us to their own funeral." Instead of diving, Fluckey did the unthinkable. He ordered all ahead flank. He didn't turn away, he turned around. He steered the USS Barb directly into the shallow, treacherous waters of Nanquan Harbor, a place so filled with rocks and mines that no submarine dared to enter. He was one ship against 27. He was in water so shallow the USS Barb could barely submerge. To the Japanese, it was a suicide run. To Fluckey, it was a massacre waiting to happen. Before the night was over, the hunters would become the burning wreckage, and the world would learn what happens when a single man decides that 27-1 are actually pretty good odds. Part 1. The Rogue Commander. Back in the 1940s, the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis churned out officers by the book. They taught you to be cautious. They taught you that a submarine's only job was to play hide and seek, strike from the dark, then run for the deep. But Eugene Bennett Fluckey, the man his crew called Lucky Fluckey, wasn't interested in the book. He was interested in winning. Fluckey wasn't just a commander, he was a rogue engineer. He looked at his Giotto-class submarine, the USS Barb, and didn't see a boat. He saw a weapon of psychological terror. Before the Nanquan Harbor raid even happened, Fluckey had already done something that made the high-ranking brass in Pearl Harbor lose their minds. He turned his submarine into a rocket ship. He was the first man in history to bolt a Mark 10 rocket launcher onto the deck of a sub. To Fluckey, torpedoes were for sinking ships, but rockets? Rockets were for bringing the hell of war right to the enemy's front porch. This wasn't just luck. This was a middle finger to every military doctrine on the planet. The Japanese looked at the Barb and saw a predator. But Fluckey's crew saw a home. He ran the Barb like a high-stakes family business. Every man from the cooks to the guys greasing the torpedo tubes was told to speak up if they had a better way to kill the enemy. This radical transparency created a crew of stone-cold killers who weren't just following orders, they were believers. When Fluckey proposed a suicide run into a shallow harbor packed with 27 Japanese destroyers, they didn't blink. They just asked how many torpedoes they could shove in the racks. Fluckey's whole strategy was built on a concept called asymmetric saturation. He knew that if he fought those 27 destroyers in the open ocean, their sonar and their depth charges would eventually find him and turn the Barb into a crushed soda can. But if he changed the game, if he dragged those hunters into water so shallow they couldn't outmaneuver, the 27 ships wouldn't be hunters anymore. They'd be a crowded, panicked herd of sheep. Fluckey calculated what he called the chaos factor. He knew that when you crammed 27 warships into a tiny, pitch-black harbor and hit them with a surprise attack, the math of fear takes over. The chaos factor works like this. The level of pure panic is equal to the square of the number of ships, divided by the size of the harbor and the visibility. With 27 ships in a tight box, the odds of them freaking out and shooting each other were nearly 100%. The Japanese commanders were trained for total war. Fluckey was trained for total chaos. He spent his nights in his cabin, memorizing every jagged rock and every mountain silhouette of Nanquan Harbor. He didn't use the official maps, they were trash. He mapped the harbor by the rhythm of the waves and the shadows of the peaks. He didn't need luck. He had a crew that would follow him into the mouth of hell, a boat modified with the fires of his own imagination, and a plan so insane the Japanese wouldn't even know how to react. As the USS Barb charged toward those 27 hunters at 23 knots on the surface, Flucky wasn't looking at his radar. He was looking at the future of naval warfare. Part 2. The Impossible Harbor, January 23, 1945. The East China Sea was a frozen sheet of black glass. Inside the conning tower of the USS Barb, the air was thick with the smell of diesel, cold sweat, and the kind of silence that only exists when men are flirting with death. Ahead of them lay Namquan Harbor. To the Japanese, this wasn't just a port, it was a fortress protected by nature itself. The entrance was a jagged graveyard of unmapped rocks known as the Dragon's Teeth, surrounded by hidden minefields that could turn a submarine into a casket of twisted steel in a heartbeat. But the real killer wasn't the mines, it was the depth. A G80O-class sub like the Barb is a 311-foot steel monster. She draws 15 feet of water just to stay afloat. The charts, half of them based on rumors and old fishing maps, showed that parts of this harbor were barely 25 feet deep. In the world of the silent service, that's not a harbor. That's a bathtub. If Flucky dived, he was dead. A single depth charge exploding against that shallow rocky bottom would act like a hammer on an anvil, crushing the Barb's hull instantly. Flucky looked out into the darkness and gave the order that made his navigator's blood run cold. We stay on the surface. All engines to slow. Let's walk right through the front door. Navigation became a game of life and death. They couldn't use active sonar. One ping would be like lighting a flare in a dark room, alerting every one of those 27 Japanese destroyers. Instead, Flucky relied on old-school grit. He used the black silhouettes of the mountains against the starlight to guide his way, triangulating his position by eye. The lookouts on the bridge held their breath. They were so close to the shore, they could actually smell the wood smoke from the Japanese cookfires and hear the faint sound of trucks moving on land. Every few minutes, the depth finder operator whispered a number that sounded like a death sentence. 5 fathoms. 4 fathoms. At 4 fathoms, barely 24 feet, the USS Barb had less than 9 feet of water between her keel and the jagged rocks below. This is where physics becomes the enemy. When a ship moves fast in shallow water, a phenomenon called the squat effect occurs. The water pressure under the hull drops, literally sucking the ship deeper into the mud. Flucky had to balance the boat on a razor's edge, fast enough to steer, but slow enough not to scrape the belly of the beast. Suddenly, the mist cleared. There they were, 3 neat lines of Japanese steel. 30 ships in total, with 27 destroyers packed together like sardines in a tin. They felt safe. They were so confident in their shallow water defense that they hadn't even darkened their lights. Flucky gripped the bridge rail, a predatory grin on his face. He leaned into the voice tube and whispered to the torpedo room, "We're inside. It's a target-rich environment, boys. Let's give them a night they'll never forget." The Barb began her turn. The bow tubes were lined up. They were in the dragon's mouth, and the dragon was about to realize it had just swallowed a hand grenade. Part 3. The 12-minute massacre. 4 a.m. Namquan Harbor was a forest of steel, sleeping in the mist. The 27 Japanese destroyers and their supply ships were packed so tightly that their silhouettes overlapped in the Barb. STBT. Target bearing transmitter. Eugene Flucky stood on the bridge, his eyes cold. He wasn't going to fire 1 torpedo at a time. He was going to unleash a saturation strike. "Set depth at 6 feet, Flucky commanded. In water this shallow, the torpedoes had to run near the surface to avoid hitting the seafloor. "We're firing on an overlapping spread. If we miss the first one, we'll catch the second. Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 3. Fire 4. 4 Mark 14 torpedoes leapt from the bow tubes, their steam turbines screaming as they raced toward the first line of ships at 46 knots. But Flucky wasn't finished. He spun the Barb around, bringing his stern tubes to bear. Fire 7, Fire 8, Fire 9, Fire 10. 10 torpedoes were now in the water, crisscrossing the harbor like silver sharks. For a few agonizing seconds, there was silence. Then the night was torn apart. The first torpedo struck an ammunition ship. The explosion was so massive it created a mushroom cloud of white fire that rose 1,000 feet into the air. The shockwave was so powerful it nearly lifted the USS Barb out of the water. BOOM. Boom. The harbor turned into a bowl of liquid fire. Because the ships were anchored so close together, the sympathetic detonation effect took over. One ship's boiler room would explode, sending shrapnel into the hull of the destroyer next to it. The 27 Japanese destroyers woke up into a nightmare. They couldn't see the Barb. She was a low-profile shadow against the dark coastline. In the blinding glare of the burning ships, the Japanese gunners panicked. They saw shadows moving in the smoke and assumed it was an entire American task force. They began to fire. But they weren't firing at the Barb. They were firing at each other. Friendly fire became the final nail in the coffin. Destroyers were accidentally ramming one another in the chaos, their searchlights stabbing wildly through the black smoke. Flucky watched through his binoculars as a Japanese destroyer unloaded its 5-inch guns directly into the bridge of a sister ship. "They're doing our job for us," Flucky remarked calmly. In just 12 minutes, the Namquan Harbor, the impregnable sanctuary, had become a slaughterhouse. Flucky had fired all his torpedoes. The harbor was a wall of fire, and 27 ships were either sinking, burning, or killing each other. But now came the most dangerous part. The Barb was empty. The sun was about to rise. And between Eugene Flucky and the safety of the deep ocean lay 20 miles of shallow, rock-filled water and a hornet's nest of angry, surviving enemy ships. "All right, boys," Flucky shouted down the hatch. "We've had our fun. Now let's see if this bathtub can fly." Part 4. The High-Speed Escape. The time for playing Ghost was over. It was 04:15 in the morning, and the Namquan Harbor was no longer a sanctuary. It was a pillar of fire so bright it lit up the deck of the USS Barb like a stadium at noon. Every Japanese destroyer still able to move was now screaming for blood. Their searchlights were slicing through the black smoke, and their heavy guns were finally finding their range. The first shells began to fall, massive geysers of water exploding just 100 yards from the Barb's stern. "Captain, they're closing the gap," the lookout screamed over the roar of the wind. Eugene Flucky had two choices, and both of them looked like suicide. He could dive and crawl away at 3 knots, becoming a slow-moving target for 1,000 depth charges. Or he could stay on the surface and run for his life. In the shallow, rocky trap of the China coast, diving meant hitting the bottom. "All ahead flank," Flucky roared. "Give me everything those engines have. If they blow, they blow." Down in the engine room, the mechanics were doing the unthinkable. They bypassed the safety governors, pushing the 4 massive Fairbanks Morse diesel engines to 150% of their rated power. The vibration was so violent, it started shaking the paint right off the steel walls. The USS Barb wasn't just sailing. She was leaping across the waves. A submarine isn't built to be a speedboat, but that night, the Barb became the galloping ghost of the China coast. She hit 23.5 knots, a world record for a GTO-class submarine on the surface. At that speed, the bow was lifted high out of the water, creating a massive white rooster tail of spray that trailed behind them for a mile. But there was a hidden killer in the water, the squat effect. In simple terms, the physics of the ocean began to work against them. As the square of the ship's velocity increased, the water pressure under the hull dropped, creating a powerful suction that pulled the Barb's stern deeper into the mud. Flucky could feel the hull shuddering as the keel passed mere inches over unmapped rocks. One wrong move, one sharp turn, and the ship would tear her own belly open. Behind them, 3 Japanese destroyers were gaining. They were built for speed, capable of 35 knots. The gap was closing fast, 4,000 yards. 3,000 yards. Smoke, Flucky ordered. The crew began pouring raw diesel fuel directly into the hot exhaust manifolds. A thick, oily black cloud erupted from the barb's vents, creating a localized wall of fog that blinded the Japanese gunners. Shells continued to whistle overhead, but the enemy was firing at a shadow. For 20 miles, it was a flat-out race against the sunrise. Flucky stood on the bridge, refusing to take cover, his eyes fixed on the 10-fathom curve, the line on the map where the water finally became deep enough to disappear. Depth 60 feet. The depth finder operator yelled, 70 feet. 100 feet. Take her down. Flucky finally commanded. The barb's bow dipped into the freezing waves. The roar of the diesels was replaced by the eerie, quiet hum of electric motors. As the water closed over the bridge, the last thing Flucky saw was the first ray of the morning sun hitting the black smoke of the ruined Japanese fleet. They were gone. They had invaded a forbidden harbor, wrecked a fleet, and outrun 27 hunters. The lucky Barb had pulled off the impossible. Part 5. The Legacy. When the USS Barb finally limped back into Pearl Harbor, she wasn't just another submarine returning from patrol. Flying from her cigarette deck was a traditional Navy broom lashed to the mast. In the language of the silent service, that broom meant one thing: a clean sweep. Eugene Flucky and his crew had swept the enemy from the sea. The brass at Pearl Harbor could hardly believe the reports. One sub, 20 miles of shallow water. A fleet of 27 destroyers shattered. For his conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, Eugene Flucky was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the United States. But Flucky wasn't done making history. In July of 1945, he decided that the sea wasn't enough. He wanted to take the fight to the Japanese home islands on foot. In one of the most bizarre and daring moves of World War II, Flucky sent a landing party of 8 sailors ashore on the island of Karafuto. Their mission? To blow up a Japanese supply train. They paddled through the surf in rubber boats, dodged enemy patrols, and planted a massive demolition charge under the tracks. As they paddled back to the Barb, a 16-car train hit the switch. The explosion was so massive it sent pieces of the engine flying 500 feet into the air. The USS Barb became the only American submarine in history to ever sink a train on land. When you look at the final scoreboard for the USS Barb, the numbers are staggering. In just 5 patrols under Flucky's command, the Barb sank or damaged over 100,000 tons of enemy shipping. But the real legacy isn't just about the ships destroyed. It's about the lives saved. In naval strategy, we use a simple logic. The number of Allied lives saved is approximately equal to the number of enemy combatants eliminated multiplied by the casualty impact multiplier. By taking out 27 destroyers and a vital supply line, Flucky likely saved tens of thousands of American soldiers who would have otherwise faced those weapons during the planned invasion of Japan. Eugene Flucky passed away in 2007 at the age of 93, but the legend of Lucky Flucky lives on. He proved that a commander's greatest weapon isn't his torpedoes or his deck guns. It's his ability to inspire a crew to believe that the impossible is just another Tuesday at the office. The story of the USS Barb is a reminder of what happens when American grit meets engineering genius. It's the story of a lone wolf that turned the tide of a war, a ghost that could not be caught, and a commander who lived by a simple rule: don't just play the game. Change the rules until you win. Today, the battle flag of the USS Barb, with its rows of sunken ships, its shattered train, and its Medal of Honor star stands as a testament to the greatest submarine raid in history. The hunters of Namquan Harbor learned a lesson they would never forget. Never, ever, corner a man who has nothing to lose and a crew that fears nothing.